I have heard this sentence a lot where they've said, to be honest, and I'm only telling you this, Grace, but if I never had sex again, that would be fine. And when I push them a little bit on that, it's actually not that they don't want to have sex again. It's that they don't want to have this kind of sex again because it is not serving them. And to think of it, when you're doing something with your body and sharing your body with someone or even letting someone inside your body, that's very intimate. And to think that you're not really fully enjoying that, that's going to fracture your relationship anyway with your body and sexuality over time. So yeah, and I love that analogy of the tennis of the golf, 'cause that's what it is essentially, in the sense that it needs to be it needs to be appealing. You need to be like, oh, and even if you're not jumping with joy, Jesus, I can't wait. Even the knowledge of, no, I know I like it once we start, because I know that I like all these different things and I can ask my partner for these different things. And, going back to the step 1, step 2, step 3, I often say, think of sex as a menu, not a manual. So a menu, and let that menu grow over time. And it doesn't have to be wild, kinky stuff. It can be really simple, lovely stuff. It's just about having that knowledge base. What brings me pleasure? What do I enjoy doing with a partner?
Grace Alice O'Shea, welcome to the Inner Entrepreneur podcast.
Thanks for having me on.
I'm looking forward to the conversation. And what I've been wondering, as I've been thinking about this conversation, I've been wondering, why are we all so afraid or reluctant to talk about sex? Or is that just an Irish thing?
Yeah, good question. I don't think it's just an Irish thing, but I guess I'm more familiar with the Irish context, and it definitely is something we struggle with here. I think there's a few parts to it. I mean, one thing is sex anyway is quite an intimate part of ourselves, and it can feel very vulnerable. And as humans, generally speaking, we want to be accepted, we want to fit in to a degree. And we're always kind of wondering, oh, is this normal? Is how I feel about that normal? We're kind of always assessing that. So opening up and talking about sex can feel scary, like in that regard. But then you add in, which is the main point, the intergenerational trauma in this country, of, it's not necessarily religion itself. I'm all for religious freedom, but, the Catholic Church is an institution kind of ruling over Ireland for so long. And just the shame around sexuality, and, so many of my clients um, would have heard some version of the sentence, don't bother coming home if you get pregnant. Like they would have heard something like that when they were a teenager. So just learning about sex in such an incredibly negative, shame and fear soaked way. And we've come a long way since then, but shame, it does actually get unintentionally passed down. It just kind of looks a bit different with each generation. So that's a big part of it, is that we're working against decades, maybe centuries, realistically, of shame behind us. So we're actually not doing too bad, considering that, I think, anyway.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think shame is probably a big part of it, which tells you that, sex to some degree reflects how we feel about ourselves. Like it's not just a physical thing we do. Like I mean, shame is something we all must have some of it somewhere. Depends how
Yeah.
it expresses itself. So possibly, and I'm wondering, when you coach people and counsel people, I imagine that I imagine a huge amount of your counseling is probably nothing to do with sex. It's I don't know. Is it the vulnerability of opening up and understanding who we are and being comfortable with that?
Yeah, that is a big part of it. A lot of my work, and the work that would make the biggest difference, as you said, sometimes it's not the sexy stuff at all. It's the more, I don't think they're boring, but the more boring conversations about, even on a day to day, your relationship with yourself, your stress management, even that, like stress affects sex and libido hugely. So sometimes it's these conversations about actually how we are outside of the bedroom and how that's affecting us then in that intimate part of our lives. But yeah, I mean, even like I use the term sex education, sex educator a lot, But that's kind of a catch-all phrase. Like a lot of the conversations, again, aren't actually necessarily about sex. Um, say for example, if someone comes to me and they they just don't feel happy with that part of their life. They just feel like, you know what? I've never really hugely enjoyed sex. I don't really see what the fuss is. There must be more to it. I must be missing out. And when we get into it, it's more about, again, a wider conversation of, oh, when you were never given the space to even think about, what would bring you pleasure, what you might enjoy. You're not used to putting yourself first, and advocating for yourself, whether it be at work or it's in the bedroom. Like it all ripples out. It's all interconnected.
Is that more with women than men, or do you find it across the board?
So straight away, I'm going to have a bias because it is more women that
Yeah.
access my services,
Mm.
full stop. I would say there's probably that exists for anyone of any gender, but I mean, definitely women, when we look at how, you know, even how we raise or would have raised little girls and little boys, so much of it is conditioning of, women are there as nurturers and carers and always putting others' needs before their own. And that can be obviously beautiful in ways, that can be wonderful, but not all across the board, not across your whole life all the time. But when you're in that mindset of, not being a diva, not asking for too much. There's all this language associated with being a woman and maybe being assertive or, wanting more for yourself. Don't get ideas above your station kind of thing. So it's really, again, it's not just about sex. It's quite a wider thing about how we're socialized based on our gender as well.
I mean, it sounds to me like it's a very holistic thing. It's a little bit like, I suppose, a little bit like any part of our life. Maybe sex is just this taboo subject that people don't feel. I don't know what generation. Maybe younger generations are more comfortable about it. I don't know, but people don't feel comfortable about it. But it impacts in every part of your life. I was listening to a podcast a couple of months ago with Monica Lewinsky. You remember Monica Lewinsky, and and interestingly, I mean, I had the impression, I'm talking many, many years ago, I had the impression of Monica Lewinsky, I suppose, as many people did have. And then I saw her give, maybe a decade ago, I saw her give a TED talk. And it was like this hugely impressive woman. And it radically shifted how I thought of her. So I came across a podcast and she was interviewing the lady whose name I can't remember, but who wrote that famous book, Eat, Pray, Love, if you remember it, and it was made into a movie.
Mhm.
And they had this conversation about femininity and sexuality as it relates to women. And the author, wish I could remember her name now, but it doesn't just come to me. And she said that she had been celibate for about a decade and she'd chosen celibacy. And the reason she had chosen it was because she felt that for centuries, or maybe almost all of the time we've been on this planet, that women didn't have a choice, that men dominated women, and women's sexuality was not something they had freedom to choose about. And that possibly in the last, I don't know how many decades, but probably, I mean, I'm 60, so in my lifetime, probably, women began to have independence from men. So they're no longer financially dependent on men. So women can now create their own lives, and now they choose a partner based on, I'm choosing to partner with you, not based on, I can't work and I'm financially dependent on a man. And she was saying, like, we have such a history, she said, that I'm just choosing to honor that. I thought that was it. I mean, not that I'd want to choose celibacy, but I just thought that was, I had actually never thought the degree to which it's only in very recent times that women had freedom.
Yeah. And
That's
it's funny.
awkward.
Yeah, like I'm a woman and I've only actually really started thinking about that. What age am I now? I'm 34 next week, actually. So it was in my late 20s I really started to get more educated about, even though being a woman is still hard in many ways, like I'm intensely privileged to be alive in this little slice of time where a big invention is birth control. We now have safe, legal, free, effective birth control, something which none of our ancestors had. Now they tried to do it in all kinds of ways, but we have it in ways we can actually use it relatively safely. Um, that, even that alone probably changed the world, really. That gave choice back to women about, okay, I can have sex, but not get pregnant if I don't want to. Um, and that would change the complete context around sex, and sex being for pleasure and connection and fun and all these things, not obviously just to have children. But even on the topic of celibacy, that's really interesting because the term sex positivity, we see that getting thrown around a lot. It's great. I mean, essentially what it means for anyone listening who mightn't know, it's sex positivity really is an attitude, and it's based in not being judgmental towards yourself or others. So basically, we're all adults. We all need to make our own decisions about our bodies and our sex lives, and just not shaming others. Um, and actually choosing to be celibate is very sex positive. Ironically, even though you're not having sex, it's actually a very, for the reasons you described there, that sounds like a really thought out, powerful choice. It's
Yeah.
not something I would choose, but I totally see the power in it. So yeah, that's really insightful actually, that it made you think of even the history of again women and sex, and God, it's changed so much, thankfully.
I mean, when I heard this conversation, and I must listen to the interview again because it blew me away. Because maybe as a man, I had never really considered this, and I then had conversation with some female friends and with my wife, and it it's just shocking that I mean, I don't know how long human beings are on the planet, 250,000 years. I've done a long, and you think, well, how much of that time has a woman had a freedom to choose what to do with her own body? And my sister-in-law tells a story of after she got married. I hope she doesn't listen to this, but her grandmother, who I remember, saying to her, "God, it's well for you. You can just enjoy sex." Now she was obviously entirely embarrassed by her grandmother saying to us, but the point was that her grandmother had had three children and she'd lost a child, but she didn't want to go through childbirth anymore, and so the only way for her not to go through childbirth was to go no sex. So he was put into another bed, and she was envious of the fact that women could now enjoy sex or enjoy the just intimacy with their partner, without the consequence of pregnancy. And again, to think that that was in a relatively short period of time, I think it's quite shocking.
Well, it is, and I would absolutely feel envious as well if I was in that position. I
Yeah.
just, I can't imagine. And obviously, sex generally is required for pregnancy unless you're going a IVF route. But for the most part, it's sex and pregnancy, and the two being so interlinked constantly. Where yeah, you can't just have sex for pleasure. Now, the one thing I would say on that is that opens up another conversation, right? About there are many ways to have sex that would not result in pregnancy. And this brings up the conversation of how, as well, sex in our society has been really framed around basically essentially penetrative sex, which isn't a very sexy term, but that's what it is. And we call it kind of this hierarchy of sex acts in the sexology world, where it's always assumed that this is the kind of sex people want. And even the term foreplay indicates that, oh, we're only doing any of this to build towards
Yeah.
penetrative sex. Whereas again, we know for like only about 20% of women can actually have an orgasm from penetration alone. So I mean, I'm not saying it could be absolutely amazing to be a lovely act to get each their own, but it's been positioned as this counts as sex. This is full sex. Whereas I like to describe sex as basically two adults touching each other's bodies in whatever way feels good, that because that's really what it is. But even the term losing your virginity, like there's so much tied up in one specific way of having sex. And I often say it is quite a male focused lens that we learn about sex in that way. But I work with men as well, and a lot of them are like, yeah, penetrative sex is great, but I also love all the other stuff just as much. I want to feel close and have fun with my partner or partners. So I think part of my work is as well like helping people's mindset change, where it doesn't have to be just well, we're either having this kind of sex or we're not having it at all. Like it doesn't need to be one or the other, that all or nothing approach.
That also comes down to a couple's, if we're talking about couples now, it comes down to a couple's willingness and ability to have open conversations. And I imagine a lot of people who sit in the chair in front of you are there because they're not even having an open conversation with themselves. Never mind acknowledging my sexuality, acknowledging what brings me sexual pleasure, and then, okay, I'm comfortable with that. Now I'm going to have a conversation with a partner.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. No, you're right. And that is a barrier to
Mhm.
having a better sex life because if you think about it, right, again, we learn, whether we know it or aware of it or not, we learn this script, this way that this is particularly as heterosexual people, right? It's not necessarily the same for queer people, but for heterosexual people, you learn, okay, you kiss a little bit, then you touch a bit, maybe you might have some kind of oral sex or whatnot, and then you have penetrative sex. So it's this kind of linear, like step-by-step way that this is usually how sex happens, right? And again, that could be amazing. That could be an amazing experience. But for couples, again, if you're together long term, the brain also likes a bit of novelty. And if we always know what's going to happen, we can check out a little bit and it doesn't leave a lot of room for exploration and more playfulness and whatnot. But to move into that space, just like you said there, of kind of, uh, we need an open communication. And actually, it's a very vulnerable place to be in. Like, to say to a partner, no, look, let's not do what we usually do. Let's try something else. And then it's like, okay, what do we try? What do you want to try? And then this becomes, oh, I have to actually open up now about things I'm curious about or fantasies. And it's definitely worth doing, but it takes time. Like, it does feel very vulnerable. So communication, as you said, first communication with yourself
Mhm.
and how you feel in your own sexuality. And then learning to, okay, and how do I share that with a partner then?
And there's a whole relationship thing underlying that because it requires vulnerability, and vulnerability in communication is not just about sex. It's about lots of things. And I think I was going to say lots of us, all of us at times have difficulty communicating from that vulnerable space where we're being completely honest. And that could be about something I feel because of something you said or whatever. Um, and then I think, that can be difficult for a lot of people. And now you add the complication of this. You want to have this vulnerable conversation and it's about something we should never talk about. Um, oh, I get why it's so difficult.
Yeah, what it is, and it's ultimately, when we think of being nervous or being apprehensive, I like to kind of strip back those words. It's fear. Like there's a fear at the heart of it, and
Mm.
fear is part of being human. That friend, that book, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. Like
No, it's
it's all about
definitely.
making, getting to know fear. I
Yeah.
actually use that book quite a bit in my work. There's really good bits in it. And if we kind of strip it all back, it's especially when it comes to sex and whatnot. Often it's that fear of rejection. It's that
Mm.
fear of being seen or perceived
Mhm.
differently or negatively. But again, if we can first work on that relationship with ourselves and understand that actually our needs and our wants and our desires and all of that, that they're valid. It's okay that we have them. Okay, maybe our partner mightn't want to do a certain thing we want to do. That's okay. That's not a rejection of you as a person. It's just that they don't particularly, maybe that's a hard no for them, whatever it is. So I totally appreciate why it's difficult. And for me, I can talk about sex very openly, but talking about, for example, when I talk about money makes me feel really vulnerable and really icky. And I'm like, oh, I need to learn to talk about this a bit more openly. So everyone has their own thing. I think
Yeah.
that just touches on something within them.
Yeah, which is bizarre because because I can have great detailed conversations with you about money, and and uh, and I don't know what number episode this will be when it comes out, but we certainly have
Mm.
over 200 episodes out, and I've never had a conversation about sex in the podcast. I've had
Yeah.
nothing but conversations about money. But it is also interesting because I agree. I do come across a lot of people who are who've struggled to talk about money. But as you're talking about having this vulnerable conversation, which I think is just a really powerful thing to do in a relationship. anyway. Um, what about sexual incompatibility?
Mhm.
Whether that's in a heterosexual relationship or not, where a woman is coming to you, and the problem is that her husband is at an 8 out of 10 his interest in sex, which is kind of, and I don't know if this is true or not, but it's kind of perception that men have a high sex drive and women don't. Um, how does then it becomes a problem in in a relationship? First, is that fact or myth? Is there actually that discrepancy? And how do we handle that in a relationship?
Yeah, so to your first question, that kind of it's often called desire discrepancy of yeah, there's just basically a difference in libido. And in heterosexual couples, yes, the stereotype would be men want sex more than women. So my understanding of this is yes, to a degree that has been shown to a degree in research that men generally speaking, widely speaking, have higher libidos. Now, my issue with this is that how on earth do we really figure this out in the context of the culture we live in? If I grew up in the upside down, like everything was flipped and if female pleasure was the, the, the main thing everyone talked about and prioritized, would we live in a world where women have higher libidos? I just think it's very hard to just say, well, men are like this and women are like this because you know, how do we talk about the social conditioning within that, right? So if women enjoy sex more, they're going to want more sex. Or if they're in partnerships where they feel their partner is an equal partner, that they truly, shoulder half of the labor involved in be it the household, childcare, the emotional labor, they tend to want to have sex with those partners more than if they feel that, they're doing more than a partner. So there's loads of different kind of dynamics there. So I meet people on both sides where a woman might have a higher libido or a man might. And how do we deal with it? Really good question. Um, I actually have an entire 7-week course called Libido Unlocked because there is so much to this topic. So I'm not going to go into the whole thing.
But we
Or
need the highlights, for God's sake.
the highlights. I'll give the highlights. So again, if a couple comes to me, or particularly if it's often a woman coming to me saying my libido's gone, and that feeling, I hear this language of there's something wrong with me. Why don't I want to have sex? Kind of this idea that you're broken. And straight away, it's saying there is nothing wrong with you. There is nothing intrinsically wrong with you. You're not broken. There is a reason your libido has reduced, or it's maybe you feel it's gone. And then it's asking her questions about, again, do you enjoy sex enough to want to feel the urge to have it? Does it feel both physically satisfying and also like emotionally connected and stimulating? Because those are two types of pleasure. We often focus on physical pleasure a bit too much when there's the intellectual side of sex and what it brings to you, right? I'm asking about her life day to day in general, like what does it look like? What support do you have? What plates are you spinning? Often when people become parents, particularly mothers, it can be hard because you're in a parent role now. And then the role of being a lover or a sexual being sometimes gets kind of pushed down the list. Um, and then I'm also teaching the difference between, and I think this is a key highlight probably for people watching or listening. The way we learn about desire is, I mean, very limited. So when you think of films and books and you name it, desire is, spontaneous. So you feel desire for the person, you feel attraction, you feel the urge, and then you have sex, right? So it's desire first, and then you seek out that pleasure of either being with yourself or being with that person. But there's actually another type of desire called responsive desire. And this is where actually pleasure comes first and desire builds off pleasure. And what that means, it's not forcing yourself to have sex or anything like that, but it's can it if anyone is listening and they think, I like sex once I get into it, you're probably responsive desire. That's how you experience desire. And guess what? Neither is better than the other. They are both totally valid ways and fabulous ways to experience desire. but you just need to learn about which one you identify with a bit more and harness that. If you are more someone who needs, again, that much warming up, that responsive desire, okay, that can be about then making space for intimacy. Don't put all the pressure on penetration again. What can bring you pleasure? What helps you feel close with your partner and feels good? And does desire build from there? So I don't want to keep talking for too long now. But that's a really key point, is that desire and how we learn about it, that's only one way that desire happens. And it's not realistic. Like, spontaneous desire, wanting to rip each other's clothes off all the time, that's obviously not going to last 50 years constantly like it does in the first few months or year. It just can't. Like, it's impossible. So we can't compare to that. That's fun. You know what I mean? We need to look at it a little bit differently.
Yeah, and I think when what you see in TV is a sex scene that lasts 3 minutes, you
Yeah.
know, and therefore precisely, and so you're given this impression of, as you said, this instantaneous desire. But as you were talking about that, well, first thing, I think it's really interesting that you do this whole, was it 7-week course on libido, 'cause and all the stuff you spoke through there, just with all the pennies were dropping of all the different pieces of this and the things you may be considering. But I think it also came back to this thing of a definition of success. Sorry, a definition of sex, because if you're defining sex as just penetrative sex, and if only 20% of women will orgasm or particularly enjoy that, whatever, then what it means is that as a man, 80% of women won't enjoy. And if you're not open to having a conversation about what pleasurable um, sex is for both of you, then it's obvious that a woman will be less interested. And not that because she's less interested in sex, it's just that what you consider sex, it's like if you and I want to go out and you love tennis and I love going to the movies, and every time you ring me, you go, "Well, let's play tennis." And go, "It's not, I don't like you, but I don't play tennis." Yeah.
Exactly.
You probably,
Great putting it.
to me, it's the same logic. But I think in most relationships, well, firstly, I think in most relationships they're not having that conversation, and then they're
Yeah.
probably not. They're probably not having that understanding of, well, hold a sec. What is it you would consider sex that you would enjoy and want to do more often?
Totally. And so many women, when they are in that space and worrying about libido, and they come to me, and I have heard this sentence a lot where they've said, to be honest, and I'm only telling you this, Grace, but if I never had sex again,
Mm.
that would be fine. And when I push them a little bit on that, it's actually not that they don't want to have sex again. It's that they don't want to have this kind of sex again because it is not serving them. And to think of it, when you're doing something with your body and sharing your body with someone, or even letting someone inside your body, that's very intimate. And to think that you're not really fully enjoying that, that's going to fracture your relationship anyway with your body and sexuality over time. So yeah, and I love that analogy of the tennis and the golf, 'cause that's what it is essentially, in the sense that it needs to be it needs to be appealing. You need to be like, oh, and even if you're not jumping with joy, Jesus, I can't wait. Even the knowledge of, no, I know I like it once we start, because I know that I like all these different things and I can ask my partner for these different things. And, going back to the step 1, step 2, step 3, I often say, think of sex as a menu, not a manual. So a menu, and let that menu grow over time. And it doesn't have to be wild, kinky stuff. It can be really simple, lovely stuff. It's just about having that knowledge base. What brings me pleasure? What do I enjoy doing with a partner? And then you're not putting all your eggs in this basket of having one type of sex. Because then someone could have erection issues down the line and you can't have that kind of sex for a while or whatever. So it's always better to have a broader idea of sex. There's a really famous book that I would recommend. It's called Come As You Are, great title, by Emily Nagoski. It's brilliant. It is absolutely incredible. It's all about what I was kind of saying there, the different types of desire and female sexuality and whatnot. And she has a sentence in it: pleasure is the measure. So if you're thinking, what is good sex? Is my sex life good? Was our experience good? Pleasure is the measure. Did you enjoy it? Not what you did, how long it lasted, how many positions you did, none of that nonsense. How many times a month you do it, blah, 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 blah. Are you enjoying it? Is it truly enjoyable? Pleasure is the measure. I often quote that line. I think it's easy to remember as well.
It's a great line, but um, I love it. But as a measure, but I'm also thinking, to what degree is intimacy and connection important?
Yeah.
And if I mean, if pleasure is the measure and both people are experiencing pleasure, will that automatically lead to intimacy and connection, or can there be pleasure where it's purely physical and there is no intimacy and connection?
Yeah. And look, that kind of sex might be fine if it's casual sex or it's
Yeah.
outside a relationship, but generally in a relationship, you are, and for some people, they're always going to want to feel that real intimate connection. So no, I mean, I think of pleasure as there is that physical pleasure, which is a very important part of it, but there's also a deeper, I call it emotional pleasure. You might call it intellectual, you might call it romantic. Like it's just something that is more in line with the emotional side of things. And that is enormously important because you can go into the bedroom and have this really transactional experience of,
Yeah.
okay, well, I'll do this to you and you do this to me. We'll both get off, happy days. Again, on paper, that sounds like a successful sexual experience, but it's lacking something. And what I help people figure out is what's called kind of your erotic blueprint. So the erotic being the brain, the mind, whatever turns on the mind. Um, do you like to feel, how do you like to feel uh, during sex, or even how do you like a partner to make you feel? Do you like feeling powerful or maybe powerless? Do you like playing with different roles? Feeling seen is one that comes up a lot. Feeling seen, feeling desired, feeling appreciated. You know, a lot of women would come to me and they're like, Grace, I feel like my partner does it that she see me until he wants to go upstairs and have sex. And I'm like, well, of course, again, you don't want to have sex. That makes total sense because it's in the everyday moments as well, outside the bedroom of, do I feel desired? Do I feel seen? Do I feel, again, you have to fill in the blanks yourself,
Mm.
and figure out what are those feelings that are really important to you, and how can your partner help you tap into that?
Is that so? Is that something men are very poor at, or are women also poor at that?
I definitely don't want to tar everyone with the same brush. I think I I suppose a lot of the couples I would see, because again we are talking heterosexual relationships and they are coming to me with a problem. So straight away I'm seeing people who are already having an issue, right? Yeah, there can be among men a little bit of a lack of awareness of how important those little moments are. Um, because, and again, this sometimes some of this can be biological and physical, where men even physically can be ready to have sex quite quickly. They basically need to have an erection to be physically ready, right? Um, but some of that could be as well the social conditioning, like learning about sex through what we call a male lens. It doesn't serve a lot of men either. That's the thing,
Yeah.
because it leads men then to thinking, yeah, that again, sex is this really physical, transactional thing. Um, and I think within a relationship, when you've also so much else going on, you might have kids, you might have jobs, pets, you name it, like we've such busy lives. Actually seeing each other can get lost. And in the Irish context, we can be a little bit squirmy about being, giving each other really lovely, genuine compliments or lovely physical touch outside the bedroom. Whereas
Mm.
most women I work with want that. They want that, those moments of intimacy in the everyday where they're not just mom or they're not just
Mhm.
wife. They're a woman and seen and again desired and appreciated. And I'm sure men want that too. I'm sure
Mm.
men I speak to absolutely want to feel seen and feel desired as well. And men need to be able to be vulnerable and ask for that as well.
I suspect we're all just seeking these moments of intimacy, and that sex is a vehicle to some degree to
Mm.
allow us to experience intimacy which brings me to the topic of pornography. I was only last week I was driving along. I listened to news talk or something, and I can't remember the full conversation because you dropped into the end of the conversation, but something was said that, and I find it interesting because I grew up in an era, and when my first relationships, etc. I mean, porn wasn't readily available. We didn't, it just wasn't readily available as it is now to young people. Um, the statement was made that was quite shocking. Was said, boys use porn to understand what to do. It's how they learn what to do. And women or young girls use porn to understand what the man wants or what the boy
Uh,
wants.
yeah.
And it it was shocking because I don't th I mean, obviously, it's a terrible place for a young man to think this is what sex is, and for any young girl to be thinking, "This is what boys want." I mean, to me, so many things going off in mind as well. What do you want?
Yeah.
And it's not your I mean, it's not your job just to pleasure a boy, a man, or whatever. It's your job to find a partner that you love and you want to connect with and what works for you both. But so is porn damaging?
It certainly can be damaging. I think with porn, oh my God, it's such an important topic, but it's so complex and it's so, you can look at it through different lenses. I mean, I'm very happy to say that for young people, I think it can be very damaging. For young minds, teenagers, even younger, they're seeing it very young nowadays. And that is definitely, I'm fully convinced that is going to have effects. I think it's already having effects. I mean, I've worked with women in their 20s and 30s as well who would have grown up with more their 20s, who would have grown up with this kind of access to mainstream porn. And it has affected, they've had these really like violent, aggressive experiences that they didn't really want to have sex in that way. But again, they thought that that was to kind of submit to that was part of being desirable as a woman sexually. Um, so it can be very damaging, but to be devil's advocate, and I suppose out of fairness, porn has always existed to a degree. We've always like not in the way it does now, but humans to a degree have always been interested in watching other people have sex and get excited by that. And obviously, not all of that is bad. Of course, it's not. Um, and for some people, porn actually can normalize certain acts. Like I've talked to women who are like, I didn't realize other women masturbated until I watched porn. I was like, oh, this is something women do as well. But look, I think generally, and the research is mixed as well. So it's a really complicated one. But where I come from in my profession is I'm trying to meet people where they're at and their relationship to porn. And I think with porn, it can be used sometimes in a way that is very boundaried and it doesn't really affect your relationship. And it's an adult watching a bit of adult entertainment. Obviously, we can go all the way up to the spectrum where you're almost feeling like you're addicted, like this compulsive use of porn. But the main takeaway, it's absolutely not real life and it's not to be replicated, or expect a partner, male or female, to perform. That word even, perform. Like sex in real life it's not a performance. If you're performing, you're not really thinking about what you want and being, again, vulnerable in the moment if we're just performing.
And it also, I think, it also turns it just into a pure physical act. We might as well be animals. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the physical act. I'm just saying
Yeah.
it turns it into something that there's no depth in. It's over when it's over, and all these things we spoke about, vulnerability, intimacy, connection, pleasure. All those things are just a byproduct. They don't, uh, that's the damage of it. And now it's programming young people's minds.
Totally, because we don't see any of that on screen. Like in porn, there's no such thing as consent because
Yeah.
everyone's already consented off camera. Or well, look, sometimes they haven't. It's really complicated, really dark parts of the industry. We don't really know what we're watching sometimes. And do they really want to be there? And we know, again, it's this dehumanization of who is this person I'm watching? I don't know anything about them. Again, as you said, it's just this physical act. I think with porn, like, it. porn itself was never intended to be an educational tool. I mean, if you watch any interviews with porn sex workers, adult creators, they're like, this isn't, this isn't where you should learn about sex. It's the entertainment industry. But the issue is, it's the absence of really good quality, comprehensive sex education for young people, especially, but also adults, that makes them turn to porn to learn about it. Whereas I feel like if you were already getting really good quality sex ed, again, in an age appropriate step, and there was no shame around talking about sex, or less shame around talking about sex, etc., then yes, people would still watch porn. There would still be issues, but I don't think we would lean on it to the same degree to teach us. I think it would be a bit clearer that this is an entertainment industry, whereas I've had this education, so I know the difference. Does that make sense?
It makes a whole lot of sense because you have another point of reference, and then you can make a decision. If all your friends are talking about what they've seen on porn, and there's no
Yeah.
point of going, but we've had this other education as well. I, I, as I understand it, you have done or do some work in schools.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that.
That's how I actually started off in this field. So I did a master's in health promotion, and a placement came up. We all had to do a placement as part of the master's, and a placement came up to deliver sex and relationships education in Irish schools. And I was like, what? Like, I'm from Kerry. I didn't get any sex ed. Now, I don't think anyone in Ireland got that much, to be honest. And I was in school from 2005 to 2010, not that long ago. We did not get sex ed. And I saw firsthand the harm it did to me and my peers. We went off to college not a clue about actually how our bodies actually work and consent and the complexities of consent. So much. We were clueless. Um, and yeah, so when I saw this placement, I said, I'm going to go for it. And I just loved it. And I actually worked in schools in total, it was like 7, 8 years.
Uh-huh.
And then I started to kind of work more with adults along the way. So right now, I don't work in schools myself, but I have a school program, and my educators go and deliver the program, and it's brilliant. Like it's our program, RSC and me, it's called. It's it's comprehensive. It's not denominational, so it's not associated with any particular religion. It's really based on research, evidence based practices, but also inclusivity, kindness, compassion, respect, all of that stuff as well. Because I think that's the gold standard of sex ed. It's where fact meets feelings, basically, and not to separate them out. It's both of them have to be discussed. And the importance of critical thinking, and making your own informed decisions. So, it's a huge part of my work, even though I don't deliver it myself
Yeah.
anymore. I just, after 7 years of teenagers, I was like, I think I've
Yeah.
given this one. Um, but the program is growing all the time. It is expanding because the curriculum in Ireland, the official curriculum, it is progressing, which is great. But a lot of teachers, understandably, still feel they don't actually have enough training to deliver this new curriculum and talk about this really complex stuff. So that's where we come in. This is literally what we do every day. We talk about this
But it's
stuff.
also probably embarrassing for a teacher who's in the classroom every single day, and it's not their speciality. They don't know the language, so to have someone who comes in and does a program, whatever, sounds super. I was intrigued by I came across on your website these letters to my younger self.
Oh my God, yeah. Yeah, and letters or words I wish I read. That was
Words I wish I read. Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God, I did that. I sometimes forget about it, which is a pity because it was a lovely kind of project. That was 2020 or 2021 when I kind of first started setting up my own business. It was just a project I just kind of wanted to do. And it came from a bit of a therapy session, basically, because again, part of lacking sex relationship education, I had absolutely no idea what green flags or red flags or any of that were in a relationship. And I was actually, unfortunately, in a violent relationship when I was only 20, which is so young. I was in an awful, really very abusive relationship. Um, And I mean, it still comes up, but it took years of therapy trying to really, God, how did I get into it? And how did I stay in it? And all those big questions. And yeah, I wrote a letter to my past self, myself, who was stuck in the thick of that, probably the worst period of my life. And then I asked other women to do the same, and they're 20-ish, probably
Yeah.
better. And they're so different. They're all talking to different versions of themselves, going through different things. I just thought it was something, what, obviously running your own business, there's always admin stuff to do, and there's always the stuff that has to get done. I think it's nice to have projects that just feel like, oh, this is just more for fill up my soul a little bit, or it's
Yeah.
something that's, just
And the therapeutic experience of just doing that and writing it. How did you become so comfortable talking about sex?
I wish I knew this. I don't know. I will add, like, I am autistic. I was diagnosed 2 years ago. And if, like, women tend to be diagnosed later anyway, because we kind of learn to mask, as they say, a little bit better when we're younger, and just kind of,
So
anyway.
are you masking that in this conversation?
No, well, I don't feel I am. I don't feel, to be honest. I now it's
Because
hard.
I don't feel it's so. I mean, I've heard you speak about this, but there's nothing in our engagement in the last 45 minutes that would suggest to me that you're autistic. I'm not obviously not saying you're not, but
No,
there's nothing visible in it that would in your communication that would suggest it.
no, I understand that, and that's the thing about autism is we're learning more about now. Is it doesn't just look a certain way. And
The whole spectrum, yeah.
yeah, and there's stuff like I would have really significant sensory issues, which you'll never know about, you'll never see. It's
Yeah,
more for people closer in my life who would know.
yeah.
So totally, totally get that, and I don't feel. A lot of time I am masking. I think when I was younger, I definitely was. I was very much observing my peers, and okay, I have to act this way, like really
Yeah.
diluting myself down. But then how I got so open, like how I don't know, is there any one particular thing that changed it? I think for me, as cliche as it sounds, helping people has always been something that I've just always wanted to do in some way, shape, or form. It's why I went into healthcare to begin with. Um, and I guess if I can use my experiences to help people, that genuinely, it gives me purpose. Like, it's for them, but it's for me as well, if I'm totally honest. There's kind of a two-way street. And once I started actually doing it, I just got such amazing feedback. And like, I screenshot whenever I get a message from anyone saying, Grace, thank you so much for talking about this. It's helped me, but as not with their name, but I screenshot the message, and I keep all of those messages because it just reminds me. Because sometimes it does feel vulnerable. Sometimes I'm like, oh God, I
Mhm.
can't believe I said that yesterday on Instagram.
Yeah.
But then I'm like, no, 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 no. I'm not saying anything hateful. I'm not saying anything. I'm literally just bringing stuff that loads of people experience out into the open. So I suppose I think about it quite logically, don't I? I'm like,
Yeah.
there's nothing really to be ashamed of. So speaking openly is the best way to prove that actually this is not something to be ashamed of, because shame only works in silence, really, as far as I'm aware.
But I think you model it because I I would think from my point of view, this has been a very comfortable conversation, and we've spoken
Mm.
about things that maybe you wouldn't go into the local pub and
Yep.
talk about. Maybe you should. But what I'm saying is we've spoken about things in a way to me that was a very easy conversation. And I would hope that, and I think you model that, you model that, you model your ability to talk about it in a way that's very natural and open and accepting. And I think the modeling of that will hopefully trigger people. Well, I feel ashamed, but hold a sec, maybe Grace is showing me something here. But I wonder, I mean, particularly in Ireland, are there still a cohort of people that think sex is bad? You shouldn't talk about sex. And do you get any negative comments? Do you get people going, "This is disgraceful, disgusting. You shouldn't be talking about this.
Yeah.
Great to your health."
I do get that.
Okay.
A minority. I can honestly say, even the people I never expected to be supportive are so supportive in, just those random people in life, of all ages, of all walks of life, are like, keep up what you're doing. I love that you're doing that.
Yeah.
No, you do get, look, I mean, trolling online is definitely a problem. I do get a good bit of that. Nothing unmanageable currently. But you do get a lot of, people. So I have one person saying, it was so funny because I was saying something about gender, and I was like, oh, I don't want to have to do this just because of what I have between my legs. That's the way I phrased that, and he was like, oh, you're very classy, aren't you? And I was like, I could have just said vagina.
Yeah.
I was actually me being like,
I was trying to be, yeah, just, yeah. And it's funny that that it was a man that commented.
oh yeah, and
Yeah.
I'm
A man deciding how a woman should speak about her body. Like,
exactly,
how does
yeah.
that make sense?
No, I know. And unfortunately, this is just my own experience. So I'm not coming for the men. It is men mainly that have had issues with me online. And I think a lot of that, I mean, we won't even get into the psychology of that, but I think again, that is, um, our conversation at the beginning of that we're living in this whole new time with women and sexuality and freedom. For some people, that's just terrifying. It's just very frightening. They see it as a threat. They see it as, uh, that, oh, a woman has more choice now, so therefore they won't choose me almost. There's kind of it down to their own, these particular type of men who would be trolling me and saying horrible things sometimes. Um, that's really about the relationship with themselves, unfortunately.
I
And it's
think
big
so, yeah. Yeah.
onto women, isn't it? But no, I do, like, now and then you do get a bit of like, with the school program, it's interesting. Like, I can count on overdoing it again. Been in the work 10 years. I can count on the two hands how many times we've had ever a complaint, which isn't a lot. Um, and again, it's people usually who want to teach their child about sex in a religious way, which is absolutely fine, but that's not what we do. So
No.
that's,
No,
uh,
see, you have to cater for the you have to cater for the wider audience. But I do think I do think that some men are challenged by intelligent, independent, attractive women. I do think some men. I mean, I've been married for a very, very long time to a very intelligent, capable woman, and I've seen it with my three sons are all adults. All their partners are all, very highly independent, highly capable, highly intelligent females. And what I love about that is because then you have a partnership because you've two people who choose to be together because clearly they're all entirely capable of being by themselves, and then you choose to be together. But I do think we're probably in an era where some men are threatened by that, and it's nothing to do with the women. It's all to do with them. Hey, look, sorry. Before we wrap up, talk about where people can find you, because I've no, what I've loved about having this conversation is because I'm hoping a lot of people are thinking, have learned, who wouldn't. I mean, this is the Inner Entrepreneur podcast, so um, who may not have drifted to this sort of content. Hopefully, going, gosh, I'm in a relationship and I've really enjoyed that conversation. It's opened the mind. So I'm hoping that being the case, that's the case. Talk about your booklet and where can people find you? Where can people find more about the work you do or engage with you if they're so inclined?
yeah, I mean, the best place is just my website, which is gracealice.com, because that's kind of a hub of where everything is. And you can go from there. The school program is rse.ie, not to be confused with rsa.ie. I have a lot of people emailing me about their driver's license. I'm like, I can't help you with. Um, so, and then I have an Instagram, which is probably, I mean, it's funny because my business started out with Instagram. Like, when we talk about being an entrepreneur, and I know that's not really what this discussion specifically was about, setting up a business, whatever. It was so, again, kind of, I won't say accidental because that doesn't do it justice, but it was so, oh, I just set up an Instagram and I'll
It
start talking.
evolved.
And then the whole thing just blew up over years for
Yeah.
from that. So that's Grace Alice O'Shea on Instagram, which is also another good place because, I kind of talk about different events and different things I have coming up. You mentioned the book. The book is called Sex Educated, and it is a essentially a big, I don't it's not on my reach now, it's over there, but it's a big guide of sex related questions that young people ask and how we would answer them as educators. So it's for young people themselves, but also parents, aunties, uncles, teachers,
Mm.
anyone. You can get that on sexualhealthwest.ie, or if you just search Sex Educated Grace Alice, I'm sure it'll come up. Yeah, there's other bits, but they're the main bits. Grace Alice, gracealice.com.
Well, I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, and I will certainly go away wiser. So thank you for that. And
Like,
look, thanks so much for coming on the podcast, and thank you for the open, clear, and very easy to understand way you talk about sex. I think that's a great benefit to everyone. So, Grace Alice O'Shea, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
yes, saying thanks so much.